Okay, members, the sitting is resumed. It's time for questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Questions 5 and 13 have been withdrawn. And Kelly Armstrong is not in her place, so I call Rachel Woods.
Question number 2.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I wish to group question 2 and question 9 together. My department has developed a comprehensive ammonia strategy, which I am currently finalising for publication. The draft strategy will propose a series of farm measures to reduce ammonia, conservation actions to improve the condition of habitats, and a revised operational protocol for the assessment of air pollution effects. The ammonia reduction element of the strategy will build on the significant support provided for low emissions slurry spreading equipment in Tier 1 of the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, FBIS Capital 1. I intend to publish the ammonia strategy for consultation before the Assembly rises for the pre-election period.
Supplementary, Rachel Woods.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. But we've been hearing that work is going on this strategy since the Minister took office. And we're also waiting for a very long-awaited air pollution strategy. And we are breaching legal ammonia limits, air quality limits, and there's around 600 premature deaths per year from dirty air. So I'd like to ask the Minister, how long are we going to have to wait?
Well, I suppose these are complicated issues, or they've been solved long ago. And that's just a reality. And we have circumstances where people think that stopping all kinds of agricultural development is the answer. I believe that there are other solutions. So FBIS Tranche 1 will help us to deliver a 25% reduction in ammonia. Now, the member may not think that's significant, but for most people it is. There is a potential to actually ensure that there is 43% reduction in on-farm ammonia, which would be a very significant contribution to reducing that burden right across Northern Ireland and improving the quality of our peatlands as a consequence.
Call John O'Dowd.
Thank the Minister for his answer thus far. Minister, can you tell us if you're planning any mitigations for those farmers who farm on constrained areas?
The problem with the farms in the constrained areas within the 7.5 kilometres is the condition of the peatlands or of the ASSIs or areas, SAP areas. So we really need to ensure that we can enable people who do wish to expand their farms to do so in a way which doesn't have an impact on those areas. And therein lies the problem. One of the things that we could look at, for example, is scrubbing ammonia in chicken houses and pig houses, although having said that, pig and chicken are not the biggest contributors. The beef and dairy sector are the biggest contributors. But certainly the capacity is there to put in and install such equipment into pig and poultry houses because everything is within the unit. It does add around 30% to the cost of a unit. So a typical unit at £500,000 or £600,000 would need to be putting another £150,000 to £200,000 to it, which is a huge burden to be applied. However, we do need to look at all mechanisms to reduce ammonia, and the captured ammonia can be used to produce hydrogen, so that is another opportunity.
Call Stephen Dunn.
On the ammonia strategy, another issue of importance to the agri-food sector and our economy is the impact of the climate change bill brought forward by a private member. Can the Minister provide an update on how concerned farmers are now about their future?
It's incredibly difficult for a farm now to expand, and we need the message to come out from this Assembly to young people that there is a future for them in farming. But if you're telling them that they're going to have to do it the same way for the next 20 or 30 years, they'll not have a future in farming because they'll not be competitive and they'll not be able to provide that efficiency. One of the fatal flaws in what SES are currently suggesting on ammonia is that a planning application which will actually deliver improvements and reduced ammonia, they're still recommending refusals. Now, that is clearly a logical situation. They're associated with the Habitats Directive, and I don't believe that is something which is sustainable going forward. So those pig and poultry units which wish to modernise are being held back from modernising and reducing ammonia at the same time. So that's clearly illogical. I should also say that there has been a recent planning application which will take all of Moy Park's chicken litter off farm, which will deliver a significant reduction in ammonia. And there is also advice has come to us from the university sector that the means of measuring ammonia is currently being surpassed, and there are better measurements for ammonia, and that also would indicate that our measurements are on the high side as things currently stand.
Call with me, Barton.
Minister, thank you for your answers so far. Minister, can you advise what research is presently being carried out to help inform your ammonia strategy coming up?
Yes, we have a team who are looking at this, led by Dr. Alistair Carson, the department's chief scientist. My department spends considerable amount of money on research, and it is one of the areas that we're focusing on, because we do know that we need to ensure that our ways of managing ammonia is carried out better. And for example, for dairy and beef farms, simple things like tree belts located close to where the source of ammonia is can actually take a lot of the ammonia out that would otherwise travel. The member comes from an area where there is a lot of special protected areas, and the importance of those areas, he knows, to tourism and all of that are vital, and for the biodiversity. So there's two things that need to be done to ensure that we give good protection in those areas, and one is the reduction of the ammonia burden, and the other is bringing those peatlands in particular up to the wetness that they need, because dry peatlands are not vibrant peatlands, and therefore we need to look at how we can wet those peatlands again. That will actually deliver over 50% of an uplift in terms of the quality of the peatlands. The greater burden comes from the dryness of the peatlands, not from the ammonia.
Call John Blair.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has spoken of the need for this ammonia strategy, and there's no doubt there's need urgently for other environmental strategies. But can I ask the Minister what steps he's taken to ensure that environmental and agricultural strategies are linked together, as these are clearly aligned in terms of impacts and issues, and this, if linked together, should ensure there's joined-up action across the sectors and also across the DAERA business areas?
The future agricultural policies, the green growth policies, the ammonia strategy, peatland strategy, all of these strategies are interlinked. The teams that are working on them cross-check with each other to identify issues that may arise, and that's a course of work that our department is working in a very cohesive way to ensure that we cover that area.
Moving to Jim Allister.
Recent date for what's data. Excuse me. The most recent date for data for which data are available is for the period 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of December 2021. The costs for the additional staff needed to complete the checks required by the Northern Ireland Protocol during this period were £4,447,580. The staff cost is made up of £1,215,231 for department staff at Belfast, £2,182,195 for those at Larne, and £98,617 for those at Warrenpoint, with a further £953,337 spent on agency staff deployed at Belfast and Larne ports. The running costs of the current contingency inspection facilities at Belfast, Larne, Warrenpoint and Foyle ports, and the service contracts for the seal checks at ports in Great Britain is a further £4.2 million over the same period. On the 30th of October 2020, Her Majesty's Treasury advised the Northern Ireland Finance Minister that as part of the UK Government's commitment to supporting the unique circumstances of the protocol, they had agreed funding for 2021 to cover the infrastructure and resources required to implement the SPS checks. HMT also confirmed that the UK Government would cover any additional funding for Northern Ireland to meet the UK's obligations under the Protocol, with this limited to the costs associated with reaching the required level of compliance. The EU have an expectation that OCR costs incurred should be borne by business.
Supplementary, Jim Allister.
So, if I followed that correctly, something approaching £10 million would appear to be the cumulative cost, a figure that will employ 200 nurses for a year or more. And if the Minister is right, and I think he is, that much of that expenditure is unlawful by reason of not having executive approval, doesn't that in fact mean that this is irregular spend, which would cause the accounts of the department to be qualified, and another illustration of the squander at a time when vital services are so short of money?
Well, the figure that Mr Allister came to is correct, but he may add to that the cost of to the Council's work that's being carried out, which is borne by the Food Standards Agency, which is another cost to the public purse. And then we have the cost to business, because they're having to acquire all of these sheds, they're having to employ people to do it. And then we have a further cost of the TSS. So the cost of the protocol to Northern Ireland is huge, it's extensive. And, you know, that is why we need to get solutions, because nobody realistically can argue that as the protocol exists, it is good for Northern Ireland. You cannot have this burden placed upon business and this cost placed upon the taxpayer and claim it to be good.
Colin Nicola Brogan.
Thanks to the Minister for his answer so far. Would the Minister agree that while the protocol guarantees sanitary and phytosanitary standards, that the new free trade deals on food imported from Australia and New Zealand won't do that, and that as a result animal welfare standards will be jeopardised?
Well, the biggest threat at this moment to animal welfare standards is actually the Northern Ireland Protocol, because the Northern Ireland Protocol doesn't want us to bring medicines in from Great Britain. And the British Veterinary Association have written to me to express their concern that if the grace periods ended, 40% of the medicines that are currently available to them would no longer be available. So the member is supporting something which is bad for animal welfare, bad for people's pets, bad for the agricultural industry, because they won't have the tools available to them to provide the care for animals that they otherwise would, because of the EU's position on veterinary medicines. And I would wish that the members would join with me in demanding the removal of the European Union's demand that the medicines that are currently coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland would not be blocked by the European Union and this protocol.
Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think people watching this will be darkly amused by the idea of Brexiteers talking about economic costs from their project. Is the Minister aware that the Office for Budget Responsibility, the independent UK, I repeat UK, i.e. British forecaster, says that the long-run impact of Brexit, the thing he championed, on the UK economy will be a 4% hit to the UK economy? That is, in cash terms, £80 billion a year in revenue. Do he and Mr Allister, who asked the question, think that is good value for taxpayers' money?
Well, the member may wish to deal with the member may wish to deal with predictions. I prefer to deal. No, it's not a fact; it's a prediction. I'd like to deal with facts. And the UK is growing faster than the economies that it left, and unemployment is lower in the UK than it's ever been, to the point where we actually need to be bringing people in from other parts of the world. So let's be very clear. The UK is not on its knees as a consequence of Brexit, in spite of the desires of the Remoaners.
Call Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It really does put into stark contrast comments from the like of the DUP's Nelson McCausland, who stated boldly that he wouldn't care what sort of situation he faced as long as he was out of Europe. Mr Speaker, can I ask the Minister, what have the costs been to date of the legal advice that the Minister has sought on withdrawing staff from checks at ports?
We haven't got a bill for that, but I can assure the member that the cost of the legal advice will be 0.00% of the costs that we're paying for people to be standing at the ports checking goods, which are perfectly good, and were perfectly good 2 years ago to come into Northern Ireland, and are perfectly good to come into Northern Ireland today. And as the member suggesting that checks on supermarket goods and driving up the cost of supermarket goods to the lowest paid people, the people who are struggling to make ends meet. We heard Tesco at the weekend indicating how much a proportion food costs are to the lowest paid and to the people on the lowest economies, which makes up a lot of people in East Belfast. Is a member suggesting that's a good thing? Because I certainly don't believe it's a good thing to drive up the cost of food to those people.
Call Roy Beggs.
The Minister has spoken of the costs to date and the delays, etc. But has there been any assessment of the cost, the disruption for the additional vets when there already is a shortage, for additional environmental health officers, additional delays and bureaucracy that result if the protocol was fully implemented?
Thank the member for the question, and the point that he's drawing to, if we actually had the full implementation of the protocol, there isn't enough vets in Northern Ireland to cover it. The number of vets who would be taken away from abattoirs, where we need vets to ensure that countries that are buying our beef have that confidence to buy it. Vets on the ground actually treat animals. Vets who are involved in all aspects of the food industry, we don't have enough vets. So I'm not sure where the EU thinks that we're going to magic these vets up from. It takes 5 years of training for very specialist individuals to become a vet in the first instance. And taking a vet from frontline work, key work, to be checking goods which, quite frankly, pose no threat, not even a minimal threat, zero threat to the European Union's single market, is bizarre. And the fact that people in here actually support this, they don't come out and stand up and say they support it, they conjure up other forms of words, but the fact that they actually support it is the height of madness on their part. It beggars belief.
I call down Dodds. Order, members. I call order. I call down Dodds.
Question number 4, please.
The UK Government signed a free trade agreement with Australia on the 17th of December 2021, and prior to this reached an agreement in principle with New Zealand on the 20th of October 2021. In addition, the UK Government is currently seeking to join CPTPP trading bloc, has commenced negotiations on a free trade agreement with India, and aims to commence negotiations with Canada and Mexico shortly. The UK Government has made clear that Northern Ireland exporters will be able to benefit from the terms of new free trade arrangements. The legal text of the Australia Free Trade Agreement does not treat Northern Ireland exports differently to those from the rest of the UK, and there is no reason to believe that this will be the case for any other new arrangements. In my assessment, the Australia and New Zealand free trade agreements will offer little benefit to Northern Ireland's agricultural exporters, as these countries have a considerable advantage in terms of prices and are world-leading exporters in many of the agricultural products for our agri-food industry exports. However, free trade agreements that are in negotiations or planned for the future could offer a significant exporting opportunity for Northern Ireland's high-quality food and drink products, and my officials are working with their counterparts in the UK Government to ensure that Northern Ireland's interests are reflected in the new trade arrangements.
Down Dodds, supplementary.
Can I thank the Minister for his assessment? The United Kingdom has also signed a free trade deal with Japan, which is one of the largest importers of agri-food products across the world. Would the Minister agree with me that there is substantial opportunity within the trade deal for Northern Ireland farmers and Northern Ireland's agri-food businesses?
Well, over the years, there's always been a debate about protectionism and about free trade. And I suppose most of us believe that the opportunities to trade across the world are positive things to do. And therefore, the agreements that the United Kingdom comes up with will balance out ultimately to ensure that Northern Ireland will have a larger pool of countries to export to, and indeed a larger pool of countries to import from. And as a consequence of that, trade should actually rise, not go down, and the ultimate benefits should be benefits to the Northern Ireland economy as a whole.
Call Emma Sheeran.
Curlia, and thanks to the Minister for his answers thus far. Minister, there are no benefits for our local agri-food sector for these free trade agreements between Britain and New Zealand and Australia, both of whom are massive meat producers and competitors to ourselves. And obviously the protocol offers some protections to our local farmers in terms of the import of cheap meats. But what engagement have you had with the British Government around the fact that our main market is now going to be flooded with cheap meat from these two countries as a basis of these free trade agreements that your party supported?
We've had significant engagement with the UK Government and with the ministers that have been involved in the negotiations. I should say that at this moment in time, a lot of Australian beef and New Zealand lamb, etc., doesn't get past Southeast Asia because there is actually better markets in Southeast Asia than there is in Europe for that material. And we will have to observe closely what the real threat will actually be at this moment in time. The threat has not materialised to be anything more than a threat, and we will continue to monitor that. I would, though, point out to the member that she represents a constituency called Mid-Ulster, and that constituency is known for manufacturing mining equipment. Around 80% of the world's screening equipment is manufactured in Mid-Ulster. And I would have thought that the Australian Free Trade Deal would create massive opportunities given the mining that takes place in that country and therefore their demand for screening equipment. So she may have something to be pleased about from the Australian Free Trade Deal in that instance.
You call Dolores Kelly.
Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer to the questions, but does the Minister share the bemusement of many that Jacob Rees-Mogg will now have to work for a living and actually deliver something in his new portfolio as the Brexit Opportunities Minister?
Well, there certainly is a lot of opportunities, and the world doesn't end at Poland or indeed Croatia. It stretches far beyond those places, and certainly the opportunity to do business in Japan. We recently have had the door opened up once again, and our meat is being exported to North America. We have had the door opened up once again for our lamb to be exported to North America. So that's good news. And sometimes some members seem to want to dwell on bad news all the time. There's a lot of good things happening out there. I've got news for the Assembly. Since we came out of the European Union, beef prices have went up, milk prices have went up, poultry prices have went up. The only farming area that is under pressure at this moment in time is pork, and we will help that sector till it turns the corner once again and prices increase in that area.
Paul Kelly Armstrong.
Mr Speaker, I'd like to start by apologising for not being in my place for the first question, and to the House and to the Minister. Minister, you've talked about the trade deals. I actually think that some of these could be harmful to our agri-food sector. I'm also very concerned that when those trade deals are being brought forward, they're being brought forward with some countries that have extremely difficult human rights issues. I'm just wondering what consideration is taken with those countries to ensure that those human rights are improved upon.
Well, thus far it's New Zealand and Australia and Japan, so I don't think that their countries that stand out as being the countries that have significant human rights issues. But certainly there will be others where that will be an issue, and that's for national government to look at those issues before arriving at any agreements with them. Unless the member is referring to Australia's rather draconian policies when it comes to COVID, which I couldn't support, but nonetheless I don't think it's quite on the standards of North Korea by any stretch of the imagination.
I call Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 6.
Air quality is monitored within East Belfast at 3 automatic monitoring stations based at Ballyhackamore on the Upper Newtonards Road, Dundonald on the Upper Newtonards Road and Hollywood on the A2 bypass. Nitrogen dioxide is monitored at all 3 sites, with particulate matter PM10 and PM25 also monitored at the Hollywood site. My department publishes an annual report to summarise air quality monitoring results for Northern Ireland. This report reviews the pollutants monitored and highlights compliance as well as the exceedances of air quality objectives. The most recent air quality report, published in December 2021, relates to the 2020 calendar year. Regulation limit values, target values and corresponding air quality strategy objectives have been met for all pollutants measured at the 3 East Belfast sites in the years 2018, 2019 and 2020. Historic data for these sites and all other monitoring stations in the network are available online through my department's Air Quality Northern Ireland website. I would like to encourage everyone to visit this site, where you can download the Northern Ireland Air app, see the locations of all air monitoring stations and receive the most up-to-date information on the quality of air across Northern Ireland.
Robin Newton, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that very detailed answer. Minister, you will know that 1 in 24 people in Belfast dies from a respiratory problem, or dies with a respiratory problem, perhaps as in association with other issues. The monitoring points that are positioned are not in the areas that are perhaps most hit by the environmental issues, i.e. the lower part of the inner city part of the area. And statistics show that indeed if you live in the inner city area, you're liable to die 7 years younger than if you live in the outer part of the city. Could I ask the Minister to give consideration to monitoring the air quality in the inner part of the city rather than the outer aspects of the city?
I would happily arrange for the member to speak to my officials and come meet me with the officials and discuss these issues further, because getting it right is critically important. Where the monitors are currently placed are where there is heavy road traffic usage, and consequently that was the locations that were chosen. However, if the member believes and he represents the area that is not the appropriate locations, then I'm happy to talk to him about that. There is a series of issues as to, I'll go back to my Department of Health years in this one, as to people dying 7 years younger in the inner cities as opposed to other areas. And air quality may be one of those issues, but it's just one. But we have that responsibility to ensure air quality is good, and whatever I can do to ensure that is the case, we will continue to try and help with that.
Paul Christliddle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Environment Minister what action he has taken to improve air quality in East Belfast and across Northern Ireland?
Well, in terms of this, and we just talked about the ammonia strategy previously and work that we've done to reduce ammonia in the atmosphere. These monitors are put in place to give us some assurances. As the member knows, I am a big supporter of switching from petrol and diesel vehicles to biomethane, to hydrogen and indeed electric vehicles. We need more charging points in Northern Ireland for people who wish to switch from combustible vehicles to electric vehicles, and I have sought to apply pressure on the Infrastructure Minister to ensure that happens. It hasn't happened as quickly as it should have, in my opinion. So we need to have that switch taking place away from vehicles which use fossil fuels to vehicles which use renewable fuels, which will improve the air quality as well as reducing the carbon that enters the environment.
Keith Archibald, very briefly, question and answer, please.
I thank the Minister for his responses so far. It will be a year, I think, next week since the consultation on the Clean Air Strategy closed, and just wanted to ask the Minister for an update on what aspects of that have been taken forward so far.
Well, in terms of the Clean Air Strategy, as a course of work that was done, we have sought to ensure that air quality has improved across all areas. So we note that levels of nitrogen dioxide have remained lower since lockdown in 2020 than previous years. The levels of particulates have been varying. Air pollution is affected by topography and weather conditions, and concentrations of pollutants can vary in relatively short periods of time. We have a Clean Air Strategy. A 12-week consultation on the Clean Air Strategy ran from November last year to February 2021. November 2020 to February 2021. Following the period of public discussion, responses were reviewed. Officials have completed analysis of comments and findings and recommendations, and those will be presented shortly. Once again, I have considered the options, or once I have considered the options and decided on policy directions, officials shall engage with other departments to develop those preferred options and policy positions more fully.
Members, that ends the period for a list of questions. We now move to 15 minutes of topical questions, and questions 1 and 5 have been withdrawn. And I call Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, you will know the good work that is being done environmentally around the rivers in East Belfast. 3 rivers I'm thinking about is the Connswater, obviously, the Knock and the Loop rivers. The water quality in those rivers, and we've seen significant news stories about pollution of rivers. Can the Minister give us some assurance that the quality of water in the 3 rivers in East Belfast is indeed meeting what are regarded as normal standards or standards?
Thank the member for the question. And first of all, commend him in particular for the work that he done in supporting the Connswater Greenway project. That project has brought £20 million of investment into the city, and I know you work closely with the local community in that for many years to achieve that. And the East Belfast community and beyond are now seeing the real benefits of that investment that has taken place at Connswater Greenway. That has been a tremendous piece of work. In terms of the river quality, we are working all of the time to improve the quality of our rivers and to take steps because they haven't been of the standard that they should have been. And there is a course of work to do to get them to the standard that we want them to be. So one of the investments last year was in slurry spreading equipment that will actually ensure that more of the material that is spread, the nutrients, actually stay in the ground, that it is applied at the appropriate times, and those courses of work will help. There is, of course, a significant investment for Northern Ireland water that is required, and unless we actually take the situation seriously there, we're going to pose great problems for ourselves, because we have a system which people term as an integrated system, where the sewers and the storm drains are connected, so whenever you get heavy rainfalls, you get sewage washed into the water system, and frankly that has to be dealt with, and we have to have independent sewage systems which will not lead to contamination of waterways.
Supplementary, Robin Newton.
Can I thank the Minister for that? And I agree with him in the sense that there needs to be a joined-up strategy between the infrastructure and his own department in particular. I assume the Minister would be pleased that and would be supportive of the investment in the new sewerage works at Sydenham that may indeed make a contribution towards solving the problem.
Absolutely, and we're seeking to work with Northern Ireland Water and the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency to ensure that we can be as helpful to them as possible in terms of developing the right and appropriate schemes. In terms of the agricultural pollution that exists, the more work that we can do in terms of anaerobic digestion, slurry separation, ensuring that we can take as much phosphates out of the system as possible, and I believe that there is a future for farmers in selling phosphates, then the cleaner the waterways that we can have. Phosphates is a big contributor to water quality. It is a valuable resource. We need to actually provide the assistance and support to allow farms to invest in the technology to take phosphates out of the system and only apply which is appropriate. That's why we've done this soil testing right across Northern Ireland that will identify the amount of phosphates that's in it. That's where we're carrying out LiDAR testing and LiDAR mapping, so that we will identify those areas where there's more significant runoff, and we will, taking the right steps, clean up our rivers to a pristine condition, which will hopefully encourage tourism, encourage recreation and sport on our riverways, or on our rivers.
I call George Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister for confirmation that there are still no reported cases of African swine fever in livestock within Northern Ireland?
At this point, thankfully, African swine flu hasn't reached Northern Ireland.
Supplementary, Mr. Robinson.
This to protect against the spread of the disease, should it reach our shores?
Well, members will have seen earlier this year how avian influenza was able to come mainly through wild birds. The strict biosecurity measures that apply in the chicken industry also apply in the pork industry. So we have a very efficient pork industry, and the farmers working in that industry have very strict biosecurity measures. And good biosecurity is the best means of ensuring that these awful diseases don't get in. Unfortunately, we have an outbreak of avian influenza in County Fermanagh, reported in the last few days. It's a small backyard flock, but again, that leads to significant restrictions on all farms and all poultry keepers in the area, and has consequences for exports. So we really need to keep these diseases out of Northern Ireland and keep our population of animals as healthy as possible.
Nicole Carroll-Hunter.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for his answers so far. Minister, recently on a constituency visit, I was notified that a significant area of trees, acre of woodland in my constituency, had been essentially taken away by a local farmer, which has had a detrimental impact on local wildlife and ecosystems. So I'm just curious what the protocol is in place to stop this kind of behaviour, which has a horrific impact on our local environment. Thank you.
Well, the protection of trees lies with the planning departments and local councils, who can place tree protection orders on species which have that real benefit to Northern Ireland, which is generally those indigenous species, and I'm not sure what the context of the tree removal is in the area that the member is referring to, whether it was indigenous or non-indigenous, but I'm sure she'll have some more questions to ask on it.
Supplementary, Carroll-Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your response. I too am a firm believer in tree preservation, but can you please provide me an update on the Forests for Future initiative, and also what other kind of incentives or strategies your department has to promote the planting of trees across the north? Thank you.
One of the first things that I done on carrying out in entering office was to drive forward the Forests for Future programme, which looks at the planting of 1.8 million trees. That's a tree for every person every year for the next 10 years. And, you know, we have had some really good support. Some of the councils have been excellent. Others haven't just come up to the mark quite yet, and I would encourage them to get on board. Other bodies and other departments have been good. And I would say that Northern Ireland Water has been one of those public bodies which has been exceptional in its response. So there is a real drive now on tree planting. We have secured a reasonable amount of money into Forest Service reserves from last year and the previous year. So that enables them to drive this initiative forward and ensure that we can get this 18 million trees planted over the course of the next 10 years.
I call Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister for Animal Welfare what action he has taken with local councils to tackle the illegal breeding and movement of puppies and dogs?
Yeah, we've had our Pause for Thought campaign, and we have identified that around 55% of puppies that were being exported through our ports didn't have the correct documentation, chips and so forth. With the result that 44% of those were actually not allowed to be moved. So there is a course of action that has taken place there to clamp down on that. In terms of animal welfare, we do wish to see that registration of people who actually are abusive to animals. And I think that that is beginning to make progress, and I would hope that between ourselves and the Department of Justice, who are absolutely critical to unlocking this, that we will get them into the right place, and that will be driven forward. Maybe not in my period of office, but an awful lot of the groundwork will have been done in my period of office to make that happen in the not too distant future.
Supplementary, Chris Little.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also ask the Minister for Animal Welfare what action he's taken to eradicate organised dog fighting in Northern Ireland?
Organised dog fighting is relatively small in terms of the numbers of people who engage in it. It tends to be carried out in the underworld, and it is one of the most heinous and despicable things that people can engage in, and it certainly has nothing whatsoever to do with sport or anything else. It is just vile, wicked behaviour by human beings to set two dogs on each other and gamble on them ripping each other apart and who's going to win. So anything that we can do, and that's, it's a policing matter, probably first and foremost, but anything that we can do to support other bodies and organisations to actually bring this to an end, we will do. And I'd appeal to members of the public who are aware of these activities, or who have suspicions about these activities taking place, to notify the police of it, to bring these matters to the attention of the authorities, because we will only rid ourselves of this problem whenever we can bring significant numbers of prosecutions against the individuals that are involved. And my suspicion is that the individuals who are involved are also individuals who are involved in other criminal activities as well. So clamping down on this is something which I believe would be beneficial to the entire community.
John O'Dowd.
Minister, anybody who's been fortunate enough to be in the chamber over this last couple of weeks have heard you lecture us all on what a great man you are for the farmers, and that if everybody follows your pathway, the farmers' futures are secure. Will the Minister tell me why, under his policy to replace the single farm payment, he's proposing to make the minimum entitlement raise from 3 hectares to 10 hectares, which will disenfranchise around 5,000 farmers?
Well, at the minute of consultation, member didn't happen to mention that we're also looking at reducing the higher band as well, because what we're actually trying to achieve is people who actually make their living off farming are the people who get the most support. So people who are operating with 3 hectares tend to be people who have other jobs, other sources of income, and it is a hobby to them. The people who are at the higher end, I don't believe need the support that has been made available to them through the European Union. So I'm trying to put it in towards the middle. So particularly the young people who want to come home and farm, that they have the best fighting chance of doing that. And I think that's an entirely reasonable thing.
Supplementary, John O'Dowd.
Well, Minister, it appears to be more than a consultation, because you've said that you believe that the middle group are the most sustainable and moving forward. The fact of the matter is that those small farmers, those 5,000 small farmers, if this proposal goes through, are more likely to be driven off the land as a result of your decision than those at the upper echelons. Will you not reconsider this and ensure that small farmers can make a living off the land? Yes, but we accept that many small farmers also go out and have a second income, but that's to survive, it's not to live a life of luxury.
Frankly, it's not possible to make a living off 3 hectares of land. It's not even possible to make a living off 10 hectares of land unless you have chicken houses or pork houses or glass houses or something that will augment that. So what we're trying to encourage is efficient and farms which are environmentally sustainable going forward. And that will involve some degree of expansion, And it may be a collaboration between some of those very small farms and some of the other farms, which aren't big, medium-sized farms, to enable those people to produce food as efficiently as possible. If someone is working out and is earning 30,000–40,000 a year, and they want to keep a dozen bullocks over the summertime, question is whether we should be sustaining that publicly or augmenting that with public money. And that is the question that I pose. So it's not something that I'm fixed on. It's a consultation. We're going out there. We will give due consideration to the responses when they come in. But it is a consultation at this stage as opposed to policy. I'm just giving you the thought process behind it.
Members, time is up. And members, please take a ease for a moment or two before we move back to another item.